So I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is that today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most popular and, in my opinion, one of the most revolutionary airguns to hit the market in 2015. The bad news is that this is not my own gun, and that means that this is probably the only video you're going to see with it. I don't own it, so I won't be able to take it out hunting, and I've only got it for about a week. But I promise you that I'm going to be doing my best today to give you a rundown of exactly what this gun's all about and give my thoughts on how good it is. Let's get straight to it. So I said that this gun is revolutionary, but why would I say that? I mean, there's plenty of good bullpups that have been on the market for the past 5 years or so. What makes this one different? Well, I think number one is the price point. This gun is offering everything that some of the top-end bullpups have been offering over the past 5 years or so. Very light, very maneuverable, good quality, a lot of shots per fill, a regulator fitted as standard. This one's actually doing better than some of the others because it's got the cocking lever further forward. Most bullpups don't have that, and it makes it very difficult to load the gun. And this gun's doing that for a very reasonable price. At the moment, it's blowing all the other products out of the water. I don't think many companies have been able to keep up with the Wildcat because it basically offers you everything you need in a good quality bullpup for a very reasonable price. But we'll get to more of that later. When FX designed the Wildcat, they wanted to design a purebred bullpup. In other words, a bullpup that gives you the things that people buy bullpups for. In other words, short, light, very compact. One of the ways to do that is shortening the cylinder and making it smaller, and many people will not want to go for a gun like that because of the low shot count. This is a 230cc air cylinder, and many guns on the market with air cylinders the same size are only giving you 20 to 30 shots per fill. But what FX has done is they've installed a really efficient valve and hammer system, and they've also installed a regulator as standard straight out of the factory, and this allows you to get about 75 shots per fill. That, in my opinion, is a real game changer, and I think it's setting a new standard for slightly cheaper PCPs on the market. They've got to be efficient, they've got to be accurate, but they've also got to be light, compact, and I think FX has ticked all of those boxes on this one. I kind of got the feeling, looking at the stats for this gun and looking at photos, that the build quality might not be up to the usual standard, but I was really pleasantly surprised. The metalwork on this gun is absolutely fantastic. The cocking mechanism is solid. It feels like a really well-built gun, and you know, everything is machined well. It fits together well. But perhaps one of the most exciting things for me is to actually see the materials that they've decided to go with for this gun, and more importantly even the finish on the cylinder and the shroud. The cylinder and the shroud are made of aluminium, and they are coated in what FX call the fingerprint resistant finish, which is exactly that. It's the finish that resists your fingerprints. Now with a small stock like this, chances are you're going to have your fingers touching against the cylinder all the time, and because this is an aluminium cylinder, first of all, it's not going to rust, but second of all, with this fingerprint resistant finish, you don't have to clean it all the time to make it look nice. I think there are probably too many guns on the market that are like over polished and extremely shiny, and they reflect the light instead of absorb the light, and while that may look nice when it's clean, the gun's not going to be clean when you're out in the field. So I probably prefer the matte black finish, especially for like a hunting situation where you're going to get the thing dirty and you don't want the little blemishes to stand out. I'm definitely preferring this finish to some of the other guns I've seen on the market. This stock actually completely changed the way that I looked at synthetic stocks. I was really put off by synthetic stocks when I reviewed the caliber gun Cricket with the synthetic stock, because that stock is really heavy. It's much heavier than the walnut stock. It's made of this rubber, and there are definitely imperfections all over it from the molding process of the plastic. But this stock is absolutely nothing like that. It's extremely light. It's got no blemishes from the plastic molding process. It's got like a rubbery texture to it, but it's not rubber. It's a hard plastic. I don't know how to describe it, but I will say that I really like it. This is called the soft touch stock. The Wildcat is now available with a laminate stock as well, which does look quite nice, but if it costs any more than this, I would say that this is completely sufficient. I really like the synthetic stock. It's one of the first synthetic stocks that I can say I would possibly actually take over the wooden stock, especially for practical purposes. It's quite a bit easier to damage a wooden stock. When it comes to ergonomics, bullpups generally feature both the best and the worst. The best being that the weight distribution is quite far back, so even if the gun's quite heavy, it doesn't feel heavy. You're resting the gun on your shoulder, it's maneuverable, it's easy to handle, but the worst being that the cheek pieces on bullpups are generally quite terrible. I've seen many bullpups that have completely neglected the need for a proper cheek piece, and they just leave the shooter to rest their cheek right on the breech. The caliber gun cricket, you actually rest your cheek on the magazine, and in my opinion that's just not up to standard. This gun offers that cheek piece. It may not be quite as good as a dedicated right or left hand rifle cheek piece, which is molded exactly for your cheek, but as far as bullpups go, this is definitely one of the nicest I've seen. The pistol grip and forestock are also actually quite nice. I think the pistol grip molds extremely well to my hand. The forestock is easy to get a good grip on. In my opinion, probably quite a big upgrade to the rather chunky FX Bobcat stock, which was basically, I'd say, maybe the predecessor to this gun. I mentioned the cocking lever being further forward earlier, and that is really nice. I was quite skeptical about it at first because it is a fairly new design on the market. I wasn't sure whether it would live up to standard or be reliable or be able to cycle the magazine every time, but I was pleasantly surprised. It's very solidly made, it's well built, it doesn't feel like it's going to rattle around, it's very snappy, perhaps not quite as smooth as the air arm side lever, for example, but it's definitely good enough for me, and it's been quite reliable so far over the past maybe 5 days that I've had it. I haven't had any issues with it, so I'm actually pleasantly surprised with that. The Wildcat features a very simple 8-shot magazine. I would have probably liked to see a higher capacity in the magazine, perhaps holding 10 pellets or maybe 12, but apart from that, I really cannot fault this at all. The pellets are held in place very well by 2 little O-rings, which stop the pellet from shaking around. You can shake this thing like crazy and none of the pellets are going to fall out. 2 spring-loaded bearings on the magazine itself allow you to actually just click it into place. Extremely easy. I mentioned when I did the caliber gun cricket review that there was that little lever that was just an absolute hassle to try and fiddle with when you wanted to take that magazine out. This is totally different. You just snap it in and that's it. Close the lever, take your shot. It's as simple as that. Oh, one thing I probably would change about the magazine system is that I feel it would probably be nice to mark the magazines so that you know when your cycle's finished. There's no way to see when you're on your last shot with this magazine, so I would do something like maybe make a little mark there. If you've bought this gun, make a tiny little scratch on the magazine or put a little sticker or something so that when you put your magazine in, you know that when it's done the full revolution you need to take it out. Otherwise you're going to end up getting to the end of your magazine and firing dry shots not knowing that there's no pellets in the magazine anymore. So that's probably the only thing I would change. If I told you that the trigger on this gun surprised me, I'd probably be lying, because I've read all over forums and I've seen on videos that this trigger is extremely good. But I will say that, in my opinion, this is the best bullpup trigger that I've ever felt before. It's definitely match grade. I'm sure I would have been quite skeptical of it at first because it does use like a rod mechanism, and usually when you use a rod mechanism you lose your trigger sensitivity, but this trigger is extremely nice. It's highly adjustable. From the factory it was probably a bit light. I couldn't feel with this when the second stage started and I was pulling a few shots off, so I just adjusted the second stage trigger pull a little bit so I could just feel when I was about to get to the second stage, and I could get a really crisp trigger release. And now this gun is shooting like an absolute dream. This is a match winner right here. If you've loaded up and you do want to put the gun on safe, it's as simple as moving this little knob at the back. It's well marked. You'll definitely know when your gun's on safe and when it isn't. I don't really use the safety much, but it's there if you want it. Now, I'll be honest, I was a little bit confused about the shroud on the Wildcat because I've seen different versions of the shroud. On this particular gun, you can see the shroud extends a fair bit beyond the end of the air cylinder, but on some of the other photos and videos I've seen from the Wildcats in the US, they seem to end, the shroud seems to end just past the air cylinder, and apparently the gun barks quite a bit when it's in that format. So you can buy shroud extensions for the gun, and I know a lot of guys in the US are putting shroud extensions on the end of the shroud to make it a little bit quieter. But I can say one thing, if you get the Wildcat and it's with the shroud this length, there's absolutely no need for the shroud extensions. This gun is dead quiet, just like it is. In fact, it's the second quietest PCP airgun I've ever used. The quietest was the caliber gun Calibri. The Daystate Wolverine with a Varrock silencer is also very quiet, but that's not out the box. I'm talking about guns out of the box. This gun is right up there with the best. It's a very simple shroud system. If you take the end cap off and you look into the shroud, it looks like a simple hollow tube, but the truth is this is kind of like a reflex silencer. There's a section just after the barrel where the air is redirected back up the shroud, and what that does is it creates a chamber at the back for the air to expand, so less air is pushing out the front of the shroud, and that makes the gun very, very quiet and very, very effective. And so here's where things start to get very interesting. I mentioned that this gun was very, very efficient with its air. Here's just how efficient it really is. If you look at that shot string, you can see that this little gun is putting out plenty of power, but still giving a huge amount of shots for such a small air cylinder. This is down to a very cleverly designed free-floating hammer system that prevents air from being wasted, and a regulator that keeps the air pressure the same for every single shot. There's no external power adjustment, but if you remove the stock, you can adjust the hammer spring tension with an Allen key to make minor adjustments to the velocity. The gun is filled extremely easily by simply turning this end cap, which exposes the fill port, and you can very easily see what pressure the gun's at by looking at the pressure gauge right at the end of the cylinder. This actually is one of the nicest pressure gauges I've seen on any gun. The divisions are marked out very clearly, and it seems to be very accurate, while many other pressure gauges I've seen on PCPs are about 10 or 20 bar off sometimes. Okay, so let's get down to business with the accuracy testing. I know what this gun can do at 25 yards. I've shot groups at 25 already. It's going to put pellet on pellet, so I'm not going to waste too much time with that. We'll shoot one group at 25, and then we're going to focus most of our time at the 50 meter range, or 50 yard range. I've got 3 different kinds of pellets that I want to try today. I know for a fact that the pellets made in the JSB factory work the best in this gun, but apparently some of these guns prefer the 15.9 grains and some of them prefer the 18 grains, so we're going to try both. And then just to see if it makes a difference, I've got the 18 grain air arms pellets, which are made in the JSB factory. They're exactly the same shape as JSB, but the difference is that air arms own their own dies in the JSB factory. So these pellets are made in different dies to the original JSBs, and apparently they also go through different quality control tests. On some of my other guns, the air arms pellets actually shoot better. So I'm not sure if they'll make a difference in this gun, but I think it's worth a try. Let's get to it. So starting off with the 18 grain air arms pellets, you can see that I've made a bit of a calculation error here with the holdover, but this shouldn't affect the group size at all. I correct the holdover error in the next 2 groups, and as you can see here, point of impact aside, these groups all look very similar in size. Okay, so these are our 3 groups here. Maybe not quite as tight as I expected, but they're all pretty good, and they look all more or less a very similar size. So I could say you can probably use either of these 3 pellets and they'll all perform fairly well in the Wildcat. And I think that's got something to do with the fact that the smooth twist barrel isn't really pellet fussy at all, which is really good news, I suppose. At the top here, you can see this group was much higher than I expected. This is the 18 grain pellets. I'm used to holding about a mil dot over for a 22 caliber gun shooting at 900 feet per second, but when I hold a mil dot over here, the pellets hit almost exactly where I was aiming, and that's due to the fact that the scope height is much higher on the Wildcat than it is on any of the other guns that I own, and because the scope is a bit higher, the pellet doesn't drop as much over long distances. It's hard to explain, but we'll get to that in another video. But anyway, so after this first group with the 18.1s, I aimed dead on at 50, and you can see the pellets just dropped ever so slightly. This is with the JSB 18.1 grain pellets, and I think this group is ever so slightly larger than the Air Arms 80.1 grains, but that could just be the particular group I shot. Both these are shooting very similar. And then lastly, we've got the 15.9 grains here. I think overall this is probably the biggest group, so I'd probably stick to the 18 grain pellets, but this really isn't so bad at all either. I'd say all of these are probably over half an inch, but under an inch, so that's pretty decent, and I'm happy with that. I'm not going to waste much time with the scope cam footage because it really didn't come out too well, but I do want you to see how stable the pellets are in flight. The smooth twist barrel in the Wildcat has certainly lived up to my expectations so far, but I'm not entirely convinced that the scope cam groups were as good as they could be, so I decided to take the camera off and shoot a group without it, and the results were way more impressive. Okay, that right there is more like it. Just basically took the scope cam off and shot a group just using my eye. And obviously I think the scope cam, just with us being in the shade, was really low light. The scope cam was struggling to actually pick up the target. So I had a vague idea where the center of the target was, but it wasn't as easy to actually hone in on the center. So this group is a fair bit better than the scope cam group, and that's what you can expect from the Wildcat shooting at 50 yards. It's pretty good. So it's accurate, it's well built, it's extremely practical, and honestly, I don't think I can find a single fault for this gun aside from the fact that it could probably do with a slightly bigger magazine. I was extremely tempted to buy this gun, but I think I've decided to go with the FX Impact. This gun's actually probably slightly better suited to the kind of hunting that I do, but there's just something about the adjustability of the Impact and the extra shot count, which is just extremely attractive to me. So I'm very excited to see what the Impact can do. I will have to wait quite a while because apparently the first shipment of Impacts to South Africa are only arriving in late January / early February, but I think it'll be worthwhile the wait. Before I sign off here, I just want to say thank you to Tony, who lent me this gun to review. As I said in the beginning of the video, this is not my gun, so if it wasn't for Tony, this video would not have been possible. And also want to say thank you to Airgun Warehouse, because I've been phoning them all the time saying, like, please get the Wildcat and the Impact in, and they've been very helpful, very friendly. They've really gone all out to try and get these guns to South Africa. I just know that they're in really high demand around the world, so they've been difficult to get hold of. But come end of January, I'll hopefully have an Impact in my hands, and I'll be filming a review of that as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.